Hey guys, it is MattySports bringing you my 2014 AP Poll Top 25 breakdown for the college football season of 2014. Now, before I do that, I want to go over my last year's record and predictions. For my bowl record, I went 19-16 with a win percentage of 54%. My total season record is 98-53 with a win percentage of 65%. And the total record, including the bowl games, was 117-69 with a win percentage of 63%. So overall, went over 500. I'll take it as my first year doing these predictions, and now I'm moving on to my second year. So hopefully I can get an even better record. So let's get right to it with my preseason top 25 AP poll breakdown for 2014. Now it's going to work the same as I did with last year. I basically go over each team's in the top 25, and I predict their final record for the regular season. So at number 25, we have the Washington Huskies. Now I have them going 7-5 because they play in the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is going to be a great conference this year. In my opinion, they're going to be the best conference this season, even better than the SEC. But because there's too many good teams in that conference, I'm going to only have to have Washington going 7-5. Maybe they'll get an upset win there or two, but I only see them going 7-5. Next up at number 24, we have the Missouri Tigers. Now, last year Missouri had a great season. They went from last in the SEC East to first pretty much. And they are losing a couple of key players, one of them being Michael Sam. Now, I still think they're going to have a really great season this year because they do play in the SEC East, and the SEC East is definitely more of a toss-up than the SEC West. And I see Missouri winning a couple of key games this season. I can see them easily going 9-3, maybe even better. I think they'll be the surprise team again this year. Next up at number 23, we have the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, North Carolina started slow last season and then picked it up towards the end of the season and ended up on a high note winning their bowl game. Now, they play in the ACC Coastal, which is literally the craziness, chaos that is the Coastal, where you can never really predict the division winner. I mean, who had Duke winning the division last year? So, I mean, it's going to be crazy again this year. North Carolina, some people consider them to be the favorites, although their schedule is a bit tricky. But I see them going 8-4. I think they're a solid team. They could possibly even go 9-3, but they're going to have to win those key games in their Coastal Division in order to come out the Coastal Division champion. So I see North Carolina going 8-4. Next up, we have the Nebraska Cornhuskers at number 22. Now, Nebraska, again, had their stereotypical at least 9-win season for the Cornhuskers. They beat Georgia in the bowl game last year. Bo Pelini's returning as head coach. They have most of their returning stars on defense. Their offense should be good. Because of that, I see them going 9-3, possibly 10-2. They do play in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten definitely is a little not as good as it was last year. So because of that, I see Nebraska at least going 9-3. Next up at number 21, we have Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M, they lost all their star players. They lost Shawnee Manziel, Mike Evans, Jake Matthews. Their offense definitely needs some reloading, but their defense is returning a lot of players, so their defense will definitely be better than their offense this season. So I'm going to see their defense going to be able to keep their team in for most of these games, but I only see them going 7-5 because you can't just replace a Johnny Manziel or a star wide receiver like Mike Evans. It's going to take some time to teach the new freshmen coming in how to play those positions great. And because of that, as the fact that they also play in the SEC West, that division's way too tough. 3 teams that are always at the top. I just don't see them winning 8 games. I only see them going 7-5. Maybe they can go 8-4 if they get an upset win, but they have a really tough schedule this season, and they lost a lot of their star players on offense. So it's going to be tough for them to have another great season like they did the past 2 years. Next up at number 20, we have the Kansas State Wildcats. Kansas State had a mediocre season last year. They started all right, and then they're just an average team. Ever since they lost Colin Klein back then, they haven't really had that impact 10-11 win season in a while. And I only see them going 8-4 this year. They do play in the Big 12. There's a couple of 2 or 3 teams that are definitely at the top of the Big 12. But if they are able to beat either Oklahoma or Baylor, I can definitely see them at least going 9-3. but I only see them going 8-4, expecting them to win their usual games. And if they can get an upset or two, I can see them at least getting 9 wins. Next up, we have the Arizona State Sun Devils. Now, I am really high on this Arizona State team this year. They are in the Pac-12 South, competing with UCLA and USC for that division. And I really think they are the sleeper team for the Pac-12 this year. They are a really great team. If they're able to beat UCLA or USC or even both, I can definitely see them winning at least 10 or 11 games. But I don't think they will, so I only see them going 9-3, but I will not be surprised if they are able to pull off those upsets, and I would not be surprised if they are the team to beat in the Pac-12 South. Next up, at number 18, we have Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss is returning a quarterback, Bo Wallace. He had a great season last year. Their defense is returning a couple of key freshmen that were great last year that should be good this year. And Ole Miss did have a couple of upset wins last year, although I only see them going 8-4 because, again, they play in that tough SEC West division. And just like Texas A&M, I expect them to win their games that they should, but I don't see them being able to beat Alabama, LSU, and Auburn. So because of that, I only see Ole Miss going 8-4. Next up at number 17, we have Notre Dame. Now, this is going to be Notre Dame's first season playing 5 games with the ACC, or at least 5 games. Now, Notre Dame does get Everett Golson back. He was suspended last year because of academic suspension. So they do have a great quarterback returning this year. But Notre Dame's schedule is brutal. It has to be one of the toughest schedules in all college football. Now, because of that, I only see them going 7-5. I believe they are a great team, but their schedule is just way too tough. Maximum, I see them winning a maximum of 9 games, but in terms of what I honestly think, I only see them going 7-5 just because their schedule is way too tough, and I don't think they will be able to pull off a lot of upsets this year. So I only see Notre Dame going 7-5. Next up, we have the Clemson Tigers. Now, last year, Clemson started on a high note, beating Georgia, and then they were a top 3 team. They were doing really well. Then they played Florida State. They got beat down in their home stadium, but just because they lost that game, that didn't really send down their morale. They still played well through the ACC. But when they played South Carolina, their rival. Again, South Carolina's been giving them trouble ever since for like the past 5 or 6 years. But they did end off on a strong note, beating Ohio State in the Orange Bowl in the BCS Bowl game. So that was a really key game for them. However, Taj Boyd is gone. Sammy Watkins is gone. Much like Texas A&M, they are losing most of their key star players on offense. So it's going to have to be their defense that picks them up this year in order to give them success. Now, because they play in the ACC, and they do play in the Atlantic Division, which from top to bottom isn't as strong as the Coastal. The Atlantic's much more top-heavy. I see Clemson going 9-3, and I see Clemson losing to Georgia, Florida State, and South Carolina. So that's where I see their 3 losses. They're still going to be a great team, but their offense isn't going to be as amazing as it was the past 2 or 3 years. Their defense is going to have to help carry them through this season, so I only see Clemson going 9-3, possibly 10-2. They can win one of those 3 games that I just mentioned. Next up at number 15, we have USC. Now, a lot of people seem to be high on USC this year. I don't really see them as being that great this year. I only see them going 8-4. I definitely think Arizona State will have a better season than them this year. They had the whole head coaching thing about Ed Orgeron last year. Didn't really go out well, how they didn't end up bringing him as the head coach. So I still think there's a lot of team chemistry missing there. And because they play in the Pac-12, that conference is just way too good. And I can see them losing 1 or 2 games to some teams towards the bottom of their conference, getting upset by those teams. So because of that, I only see USC going 8-4. Next up at number 14, we have the Wisconsin Badgers. Now again, Wisconsin, they're usually a consistent team, at least usually about 9 wins. They've been getting on mostly 10-win seasons recently. Now Wisconsin, again, they play in the Big Ten. The Big Ten's not strong this year, but the real true test of the season will be their first game of the season when they have to play LSU. If they are able to beat LSU, I think the sky is the limit for this Wisconsin team. They could possibly run the table in the Big Ten. I think it's all going to determine about the LSU game to set their tempo for the season. And And if they're able to win that, I can see them winning at least 11 games, but I only see them going 10-2. Again, they play in the Big Ten. I think they'll be able to run their division a little bit, and I expect to see them to have another solid 10-win season. Next up at number 13, we have the LSU Tigers. Again, just mentioned them with Wisconsin. Again with LSU, they play Wisconsin for their first game of the season. Now, LSU again plays in the tough SEC West, where they have to play Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, all the great teams in the SEC West. Now, LSU lost their quarterback, Zach Mettenberger. He's gone. I'm really curious to see how their offense is going to be without bringing in a new quarterback. Their defense is going to be good. It's the SEC. All defenses are great there. So I definitely see their defense going to be the key strong point to the season. And I'm just curious to see how they'll respond when they have to play Alabama and Auburn and Florida, even Florida from the SEC East. I'm curious to see how they play. If they are able to play great, like they know how to play LSU football, I can see them winning at least 10 games. However, I only see LSU going 9-3 just because the competition in the SEC is too tough for them this year, in my opinion, I think. So, and next up at number 12, we have another SEC team, Georgia Bulldogs. Now, Georgia is personally my favorite to win the SEC East this year. They're bringing back Todd Gurley, who many consider to be a Heisman finalist this year. Todd Gurley should have a great season. However, they do lose their starting quarterback in Aaron Murray, much like most of the other 8 SEC teams that have lost their starting quarterbacks for the season. However, Georgia's defense is going to be really good. They're bringing Florida State. They got Florida State's defensive coordinator to bring him for their system. And Todd Gurley's going to have a great season. I'm curious to see how the quarterback play will be without Aaron Murray, but I still think their offense is going to be solid enough because of Todd Gurley and Herschel Walker. They have a 1-2 punch running back system. I think they'll be able to run the table in the SEC East, and I see them at least going 10-2, possibly 11-1, and I would not be surprised if they win the SEC and the whole championship itself. I think they're going to be a really great team this year, and I think some people might be sleeping on them, so I at least have Georgia going 10-2. Next up at number 11, we have Stanford. Now again, another team from the Pac-12. A lot of people, I want to say they're high on Stanford, but I only think Stanford's going to kind of have a great season this year. Not like their usual 10-win seasons that they have been having the past few years. I see Stanford only going 9-3. I think Oregon's going to be better than them, even though Stanford does have really physical defense. I just feel like UCLA is going to be too good for them. I definitely see Stanford as the third best team in the Pac-12, and because of that, I only see them going 9-3 because I think Oregon and UCLA will both beat them, and I just think they're both better than Stanford as a whole. So I only have Stanford going 9-3. Next up at number 10, we have Baylor from the Big 12. Baylor's going to be competing with Oklahoma for the Big 12 this season, and, in my opinion, a sleeper team that people should watch out for in Texas. I think Texas would also be a really great team. I would not be surprised if Texas won the Big 12 this year. That would probably be my bold prediction, you could say. But Baylor, I have them going 10-2. They did lose to UCF last year in the Fiesta Bowl with Bryce Petty, but I still think their offense is going to be really great. I think their offense is going to carry them through the Big 12 because the Big 12 is definitely more of an offensive conference, not as much good defense as there is in the Big 12. So because of that, I think Baylor will be able to at least win 10 games. I wouldn't be surprised if they only won 9 games. They might get upset along the way, but I still see Baylor winning 10 games and going 10-2. Next up, at number 9, we have the South Carolina Gamecocks. Now, people are high on South Carolina. Obviously, they lost probably the best defensive player last year in Jadeveon Clowney. He's gone to the NFL now. But I still think their defense is still going to be solid. Their offense is definitely going to be balanced. I'm going to be curious to see how their offense performs and how their defensive front performs without Jadeveon Clowney. Because last year, everyone double-teamed Jadeveon Clowney, so he wasn't able to get that much room. But now that Jadeveon Clowney's gone, I'm curious to see how even their front seven will be and how they'll be able to approach the quarterback. So I still think their defense is going to be good. They're going to definitely be competing with Georgia for the SEC East, and I see them going 10-2 as well, along with Georgia. It's going to be a really close fight between Georgia and South Carolina, but I see Georgia beating South Carolina though, and that's why I have South Carolina going 10-2 and have Georgia winning the SEC East. South Carolina is still going to be a great team, I just don't think they're going to be better than Georgia, and they're not going to be the top of the SEC East this year. Next up at number 8, we have Michigan State. Now, I'm kind of along with the bandwagon of everyone else that people think Michigan State's going to make the 4-team college football playoff. I agree. I think Michigan State's going to run the Big Ten easily, more so because of the key injury that happened to Braxton Miller for Ohio State. Ohio State's going to be without their starting quarterback. Many consider Braxton Miller to be one of the Heisman favorites this year. He's out for the season. And because of that, I think that gives Michigan State a great opportunity to have this be their year where they get to run the Big Ten. I mean, they did win the Big Ten last year. I think they will be able to repeat again this year. They have such a tremendous defense. Their offense is going to be able to run balanced plays. It's still going to be consistent, and their defense is just going to be great. And again, the Big Ten's down this year. I see them pretty much steamrolling through everyone in the Big Ten. So because of that, I have them going 11-1. I only have them going 11-1 because I still think there might be a possibility where they could lose that one game where, oh, you should win, but it just happens, and you can't predict some of these things. But I see Michigan State going 11-1. Definitely not a record to slouch about. They're still going to be a solid team this year, and I think they are the favorite to win the Big Ten. Next up at number 7, we have UCLA. Now, UCLA, I do think, is going to win the Pac-12. I'm kind of with the bandwagon of everyone else. Brett Hundley's going to have an amazing season. Their offense is going to be good. Their defense is going to be improved. UCLA is returning a great team that they had last year. I think they'll be able to incorporate their system again well this year. I think they will be able to beat Arizona State. I think that's going to be the key game in the division for the Pac-12 South. And because of that, I see UCLA coming out of the Pac-12 South. And I see UCLA going 10-2. Now, I know this is probably sort of a minimum win record for them, but I do see them possibly going 11-1, but I think 10-2 is more of a realistic record for this Bruins team. Next up at number 6, we have the Auburn Tigers. Now, of course, everyone knows Auburn was Cinderella's team last year, team of destiny, the Hail Mary, the missed field goal return for touchdown to beat Alabama. They're still going to be really great. They have a lot of players returning. They don't have Trey Mason, but they still have Nick Marshall, and Gus Malzahn's still going to be able to run that amazing, fast-paced tempo offense that they were able to do last year. I think it will work again this year in the SEC as well. And because of that, I see Auburn going 10-2. Possibly could go 11-1, but again, the SEC West is just so stacked, and they have to play Georgia in the SEC East for a cross division. That could be a game that Georgia could win. I just feel like Auburn's schedule is too tough for them to win 11 games like they did last year, so I only see Auburn going 10-2. Next up at number 5, we have Ohio State. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Braxton Miller's gone. Pretty much kind of really ruins the morale. Was probably going to be one of the best players in college football this season. Now, just because he's injured doesn't mean Ohio State's going to be bad. They still have a lot of great players overall as a full team, especially on defense. And because of that, I see Ohio State at least going 10-2. I really think they could go 11-1, but because of that key injury to Braxton Miller, I think that will cost him a game, and I only see Ohio State going 10-2. Next up at number 4, we have the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, I definitely think this is a bit of a overrating for Oklahoma. I mean, yes, they came out of that great win against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Blake Bell's projected to be the starting quarterback this year. He had a great game against Alabama, but I'm just curious to see how he will perform for his first true season as a starting quarterback. Again, he does play in the Big 12. The Big 12 is just kind of just like a mediocre conference, just a little above average. They are going to have to compete with Baylor and Texas for the Big 12. It's going to be curious to see how they perform in those games, but I still see Oklahoma going 10-2. Again, they're going to be a great team. I just don't think they're going to be a team that's going to make the college football playoff. I just don't think they're not good enough, and I only see them going 10-2. Next up at number 3, we have the Oregon Ducks. Again, I think this is sort of a bit of an overrating ranking for this team. I only see Oregon going 10-2. They play in a tough Pac-12 conference. And I possibly see Oregon getting upset at least once, maybe 2 times. I think Oregon, of course, their offense is still going to be great. They always have speed, always high power, high tempo, a lot of points scored for their offense. Their defense is going to be a little improved in my opinion, so I do see their defense going to be able to step up this year. Their offense is going to be stacked, but I just don't really buy the hype of Oregon. I only see them going 10-2. I mean, sure, yes, they can probably win 11 games. In fact, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they went 9-3. But I only see Oregon going 10-2 just because I think they're going to have trouble with Stanford, UCLA. All the teams in the Pac-12 are just so good this year, and I think they will struggle in a couple of those games, so I only see them going 10-2. Next up at number 2, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, Alabama was pretty much just going through last season, going with an undefeated record, and then they met Auburn, and the kick return happens. Everyone was shocked. They thought, oh, Alabama's going to three-peat this year. Alabama's going to do great. Unfortunately, they lost that game to Auburn, for the Alabama fans at least. And then they ended up losing to Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl. So I'm curious to see how Nick Saban's going to be able to bounce back his team this season. They are losing their starting quarterback in A.J. McCarron, and a lot of great talent that was on their defense. Of course, they're Alabama. They're going to be able to reload. I'm just curious to see how Nick Saban's going to incorporate the new players into his system. I'm curious to see how he goes through the SEC. He does have to play Florida and Tennessee from the SEC East. Two teams I think that could be sleepers in that division. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Alabama got upset at least once or twice. But I see Alabama going 11-1. I think they're still going to win the SEC West. I just think they might have trouble with one or two teams, but this should be another successful season for Alabama, and I do see them making the college football playoff. And lastly, at number 1, we have the Florida State Seminoles. Last year, they went 14-0. They won the national championship. Jameis Winston won the Heisman. A lot of their players got a bunch of different awards and recognitions. Now, Florida State does lose a couple of key players on offense. They lose Kelvin Benjamin. They lose Kenny Shaw. They lose Devontae Freeman. They lose James Wilder. They lose 2 of their top 3 receivers and basically their whole rushing attack from last year. Yes, they do have Carlos Williams coming in as a running back, but Carlos Williams just kind of started becoming a running back last year. He wasn't a full-time starting running back. This is going to be his first true season as the running back for Florida State, so I'm curious to see how he will perform. I think he's going to have a great season. He'll definitely, I think in my opinion at least, be able to rush for 1,000 yards. And of course their defense, they do lose a lot of key veteran leadership in LaMarcus Joyner and Telvin Smith. Their defense is still going to be good. They do return Mario Edwards Jr., my bad, at the defensive end, so I still think their defense is going to be great. Again, they play in the ACC. I will admit it's not the toughest conference. They should still be able to pretty much take care of their competition, except for maybe the games against Clemson or Notre Dame and possibly Louisville on Thursday night. That could be a trick game for Florida State. However, I do see them maybe losing one game on an upset, possibly that Louisville game on Thursday night, or maybe on the road at Miami. So because of that, I only see Florida State going 11-1. Again, could they go 12-0? Yes, they have the best odds to go undefeated, but I just see Florida State pulling a Florida State where they lose one game like they did a couple of years before to NC State. I do think that could happen. I don't think they have as much leadership as they did last year, so I'm curious to see how Jameis Winston will perform this year. But overall, I think they'll go 11-1. I'm not sure if they'll make the playoff if they lose one game. It all comes down to the committee. But that's pretty much it for me, guys. I predicted the records for all the top 25 teams for the preseason. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And tell me who your favorite team is, like your expectations, bold predictions, stuff like that. And anyway, guys, that'll be it for me. Expect Week 1 predictions coming out the next day after this one. First game starts at Texas A&M South Carolina on Thursday night, so I'll be ready for that one. And expect my Week 1 predictions in about the next day. So anyway, guys, this has been MattySports. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll enjoy the college football season that is to come. See you guys later.